We're excited to have Dr. Juliana Galante from Pacer Physical Therapy joining us, as well as Heather Zeaman from Back Bay Health, and they'll be joining us here in a moment. While we're waiting for them to join us, and there's Heather as we speak, you'll see in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a little question mark. Please tap that and ask your questions. I ask you to do that because if you put them in the comments, they're gonna fly right on by and we're probably gonna miss them. But if you put them into the question mark area, then they'll stay there and we'll actually be able to get to your questions. So throughout the conversation today, we're gonna be talking about postpartum from a physical therapy standpoint, as well as from a nutritional standpoint. We'll be talking about it in 4 phases, I guess, right? So 1 to 6 weeks, 6 weeks to 12 weeks, and then 12 to 14 weeks and 14 plus weeks. And so we'll be discussing that throughout the process, throughout the conversation, excuse me. And there's Dr. Juliana joining us, perfect timing too. So if at any point you have to drop off from this conversation, you just know that it'll be on our IG feed right afterwards, but also on our YouTube channel. And then probably by the end of this week, we'll be launching a webpage with all of our Fireside Chats. We have 8 episodes already done, so you can find those on our YouTube channel and by the end of the week on our website. Anyway, Heather, Dr. Juliana, thank you so much for joining us today on our Fireside Chats, which is our 9th episode today.
Cool. Thanks for having us.
What I'd like to do is have you guys introduce yourself, and then we'll jump into some of the questions. So Dr. Juliana, please introduce yourself and let the audience know who you are and what you do.
Sure, cool. Thanks for having me again. My name is Juliana Galante. I'm a doctor of physical therapy, women's health specialist. I specialize in the pregnancy and postpartum period. I practice here in Boston, but I also offer online programming for all women who need support during their pregnancy and postpartum. So thanks again for having me today.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I am Heather Zeman. I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist, and my population is a bit more broad. I work with athletes and active adults who are usually seeking to move forward from dieting behaviors of their past, often remedying digestive concerns, and then applying really intentional and intuitive fueling and hydration strategies to fitness, performance-based goals. So working with everyone from marathoners, first-time triathletes, to, as we'll talk about today, postpartum people looking to get back into exercise and redefine what it means to perform. So really excited to talk about that today.
So I'm going to remind you all again, tap the little question mark when you have questions, because look, clearly this is not my area of expertise, and that's why we brought experts on. So I'm probably going to fumble my words and my questions throughout this conversation, but don't feel intimidated. Type your question into the question mark area and either Juliana or Heather will answer it for you. So please make sure you use that. So without further ado, let's jump into it. So one of the things that we had talked about doing was having this set up as time periods, right? 1 to 6 weeks, 6 weeks to 12 weeks, 12 to 14, and then 14 plus. So Juliana, the question will be for you. In the first 6 weeks, what type of movement should a woman be doing during those first initial weeks postpartum?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I think one of the main things we wanted to talk about was like healing timelines, because after you give birth, it is a traumatic experience and it's an amazing experience, but it's just something we want to handle with care and give ourselves grace in getting back to doing the activities we love. So whether you were active during your pregnancy or you weren't able to work out at the capacity you might have wanted to, it's important in your initial few weeks postpartum to really just rest. That doesn't mean you can't move at all. You can start going on walks when you feel like you're able, especially if you're not experiencing any pain, any pressure, leaking, or anything like that. You can definitely start walking, keep moving. That's really important. And one thing, whether you had a vaginal delivery or a C-section delivery, everyone can kind of start working a little bit on breathing. I know that's a super hot topic in most of rehab and even outside of rehab today. practice breathing, and maybe people don't know what that means, so I'm just going to touch on that a little bit here. When we're pregnant, our organs do actually change where they're oriented in our body to make room for our baby. And one of those organs is our diaphragm, and it's actually a big one of our major breathing muscles. And a lot of women as they get closer to delivery, oh, I'm having trouble going up the stairs, I'm feeling out of breath, I'm feeling winded. They're not making that up. Their diaphragm is literally shoved up in their rib cage, and it's really hard for them to breathe because it can't expand the way we want it to. So postpartum, being able to work on just deep breathing is going to be one of the first things you can start to do within your first 6 weeks. You can do that sitting, you can do that lying down, you can do that standing. The big thing I like to kind of talk to women to kind of practice it is during feeding, whether you're breastfeeding or bottle feeding. It's just a nice relaxing thing you can do to kind of bond with your child. You're kind of just sitting there anyway. And it kind of does help also to kind of calm your nervous system, get you more of in like a rest and digest state, which is actually really good for the baby too. So breath work is awesome kind of form of, it is exercise to your diaphragm, and you'll get a little bit of unintentional core work as well too as you're breathing like that. So you can start there.
Most people tend to skip their core work, so that might not be a bad thing. Even for men, right? Like we can focus on our breathing to help our cores too. Like let's not pretend we don't need that help too. So firstly, right? So I think one of the things that we think about, at least that I think about, right, is athletes, we're endurance athletes, we're training 10, 12, some of us 20 hours a week. And so we're very active prior to pregnancy. And then, in those first 6 weeks, and Heather, this also kind of pertains to you, right? So you're eating a certain way with a super active lifestyle that's training so many hours. How does that get impacted in the first 6 weeks? So Juliana, I go back to you. If I'm a female and I'm training 12, 15 hours a week, which can be a lot, now all of a sudden, I'm super active, and now what? Still sit down and make sure I'm focusing on my breathing? Can I go about movement? What are we looking at?
Yeah, so that's also a good thing. I think the active individual, especially if you're feeling good, like there's a lot of people a week or two after, they're like, oh, I feel pretty good. You want to think about pregnancy as almost a little bit like an injury, where if you were to sprain your ankle, you're going to go out and run 5 miles. It might not be the most ideal thing for your body. So things I would recommend is like a lower impact activities. If you're feeling comfortable, you can try to bike. If you're feeling comfortable, you can try a light elliptical. You could go into a pool. You can try some of those things that are lower impact. I wouldn't recommend running in the first 6 weeks or even up to the first 12 weeks. But things like that are okay to do. A lot of like yoga and mobility and things like that to just kind of reset your body. Another thing is just working on your posture throughout the day. So that means, how am I carrying my baby? You're going to have an 8 to 10 pound little one that you're holding around. That's weight. That's something. So when your doctor's like, don't lift anything for the first 6 weeks, it's like, well, my baby weighs 8 pounds. What do I do? So yeah, I would work on like, how am I lifting my baby? Trying to be a little bit more ergonomic with that. You're constantly putting the baby up and down. I know that doesn't seem like your normal exercise, but that is something. But really in these first 6 weeks, try to heal, work on your longer walks and lower impact activities like biking or swimming.
Awesome. So Heather, again, so I'm eating, right? Because I got to eat to recover from all of those hours of training. Now that this has changed, and but my body, again, this is me as a male trying to figure this all out. So I'm sure for some of the women out there, it's a little bit easier of a thought process. But how does nutrition now change?
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that we might be speaking directly to postpartum people. We might also be speaking to their partners who want to support them. So everyone plays a role in this, and it might sound simple, but I want to set the theme for nutrition at least. And I think it applies for the physical side of things. Small changes really add up. And from the beginning, we want to peel it way, way back and just focus on eating, period. So you picture yourself coming home, new life, new routines, new little tiny human to care for, probably have people coming in and out of your house. So it can be really easy to get caught up in all of that, especially if you're breastfeeding, especially if you're feeding your baby, on their schedule, around the clock, not sleeping. So we need to eat to support your own energy, support your own nutrient needs and think about rebuilding your nutrient stores after everything your body has just been through. It then also becomes about providing nutrient dense and calorically dense breast milk, healing wounds if you had any wounds during delivery or C-sections, building your immune system. The list goes on and on and on. But the first goal is to simply eat and eat enough calories. So instead of going into the nitty gritty of specific nutrients, which we'll get to over time, the priority here is not skipping meals. And then we'll build from there and focus on what exactly we should be eating, which I can jump into now or wait a moment if there's a follow-up question on that.
Awesome. So for those of you who are just joining us, my name is Jason Bundy. I'm one of the owners of Run Try Bike, and we are being joined today by Dr. Juliana Galante of Physical Therapy and Heather Zeman of Back Bay Health. Dr. Galante focuses on physical therapy and Heather focuses on the nutrition side. And today we're talking about postpartum. And so we just covered the first 6 weeks. So now we're in the 6 to 12 week phase. And so I'll pose this question to you first, Heather. So now what changes? So now, the body has, I guess, sort of grown accustomed to where they're at and getting, recovering from the pregnancy. Now in these next 6 to 12 weeks, what changes nutritionally? What do they need to focus on instead of just trying to eat at this point?
Yeah, so it's interesting. This is often where I hear, okay, I'm actually struggling to eat because friends stopped dropping by, nobody's bringing food anymore, right? So now it becomes, okay, I'm doing so well. I had casseroles and I had all the things I froze from before delivery. Now what? Or now, like baby maybe is a little more active or it's unpredictable. Same thing applies. Don't skip meals, but then focus on really dialing into easy handheld items. This is a bit of a strategy and kind of nutrient priorities, but thinking about anything you can access, open, and eat with one hand is a strategy I often recommend. But beyond that, focusing on breakfast, lunch, dinner for sure, snacks in between. Protein at each meal is huge. So getting enough protein, even if it's a little snack, a handful of nuts, some peanut butter on an apple, that will really add up and help you meet your protein needs throughout the day. And healthy fats, so protein, healthy fats are something you also want to focus on now if you have the brain space or a little bit more control over what you're eating now that people aren't bringing food. So things like avocado or guacamole, something you can dip, right? Nuts, like I just mentioned. And then thinking about fiber, thinking about color, getting your nutrients, one, from all those colorful fruits and veggies, and the fiber, which can help prevent constipation. I know that's a big thing after delivery, is getting your bowel movements back. So we're always talking about that next to food. Focusing on the protein, healthy fats, and a bit of fiber or color. At least 2 of those categories at each meal or each snack can be a really nice way, even just mentally, to say, all right, I'm getting close to what I need. I'm checking off these boxes.
It's interesting because that to me, as obviously being a male and not being able to give birth, right? As a partner, to me that resonates, right? Okay, so I need to make sure that I need to eat that way, which means make 2 of them. So would that be the advice as well then for the partner? Like, hey, eat these types of food as well, even though you're not the pregnant one?
For sure, and you picked up on my trick that this is really getting people to meet their baseline needs. And so what changes at this point, especially if you're breastfeeding, and this is a common question, is do I need extra calories when I'm breastfeeding? How many calories do I need? For the first 6 months, you need about 500 extra calories per day. After that, down our timeline, it does drop to about 300 to 400. So that's an extra snack, that's an extra small meal. And yes, if you are a partner, if you are making food for someone, bringing some bars, bringing those handheld items, but putting it into a plate, like you just said, is exactly correct. Yeah.
And so to you, Juliana, I've heard, I've been cleared for exercise. And again, as a male, that doesn't make sense to me, right? Because what do you mean you've been cleared to exercise? Can you help explain that so that for any of the males that are in this conversation, get an idea, what is that movement afterwards?
Sorry, you broke up, but it was one of those things where you can talk to a lot of professionals, and there's no real evidence that says at 6 weeks anything major has really changed in your body. I think it's just a timeline that they're like, okay, you're settled in, you've kind of established some type of routine at this point, come back and let's see what things have healed. So I mean, this is a time where you'll go back. Can you hear me? Okay. You go back to your doctor, and this is just a time where you can talk to your doctor about like your needs. I think that's important, and there should definitely be more of these postpartum follow-ups. I'm like trying to advocate for this, because the one follow-up for mom and like the multiple follow-ups for baby, moms need a lot of support during this time. Like, how do I navigate getting back into my sexual health with my partner? How do I navigate challenges that I have when I get back to exercise? Who's that professional who I can go to? And a lot of people don't recognize that physical therapists are in a great position to understand what happened to your body during a pregnancy, and that we can really help support you in that. And a lot of our healthcare is starting to change, but this 6 week period is just saying, okay, you can return to exercise, but it's not really, it's kind of ambiguous. And for a C-section versus a vaginal delivery, there's a lot of differences. Like I did say kind of lower impact things. That's more for like someone who didn't have a C-section, because if you had a C-section, it is a major abdominal surgery. So you really want to make sure that that incision site is healed. That's one of the things they'll look at your 6 week post-op. But another thing you want to really consider is maybe seeing a physical therapist after that, because if you have back surgery, you get usually an automatic referral to go to physical therapy. So C-section, major abdominal surgery, your abs were cut through, you should probably go see a physical therapist. And that's whether you feel like you're having any trouble or not. You might as well get a screen, get your body checked out, make sure everything's good, and then you can move forward. So the 6 week timeline, we kind of just differentiate between, okay, 6 weeks, you're really not doing too much. After 6 weeks, you can maybe start adding in a little bit more movement, but still in these first few weeks, up to 12 weeks, you're really just slowly adding things as you can tolerate. And that's going to really depend on the person and on your symptoms. So it's hard to, just as a general thing, do movement that feels good for your body, try to slowly get back into doing it, and try to stay on the lower impact side. So no running.
I mean,
Can't emphasize enough.
we talk athletes, right? Type A. So
I
please,
know. Hard.
right? Go from walking to fartleks at 6 weeks, correct?
Yeah, no. You definitely want to, and we'll get into this too. Like by the 12-week mark, I look at a lot of things like, okay, are you able to walk for 30 minutes without feeling anything? Like, because some people might say, oh, I didn't feel anything. And then the next day they feel sore. And they're like, why do I feel sore? I just walked for 30 minutes. That wasn't anything crazy. Or I did all these hills in my neighborhood while pushing a stroller with my toddler and my, newborn, and I'm sore. Like, what the heck? I ran 12 miles when I was in my third trimester. Like, what the heck's wrong with me? Your body's just healing, and that's okay.
Yeah, I would imagine that's a hard thing to disconnect, right? I was doing this while pregnant, so I'm not carrying the extra weight anymore. I should be able to do it again. Yeah. So that's, to me, that sounds like excellent advice, right? Just take it easy, go slow. You'll be back to yourself in no time, as they say.
Yeah. And we also need to keep, one last thing we have to keep in mind, like really physiologically, so how our body heals, 4 to 6 weeks, or 4 to 6 months rather, is really that timeline where our pelvic floor, that's how long it takes our pelvic floor to really heal. Like it's stretching 400 times its normal length, which is insane. And to come back and really start to heal and shrink, it's going to take a few months. And remember, we're pregnant for 9 months, so that's like, okay, that's pretty impressive if you think about it, right? And then you also want to think about the connective tissue of our abdominals. They do separate a little bit when we're pregnant. This isn't that scary. It happens to most people. But that tissue to kind of come back and kind of heal back together, that can take 6 to 7 months. So just keeping some of those timelines in your head, like when you really want to push yourself, oh, well, my body is still healing. And that's something we unfortunately cannot speed up. When I find out how to, I will let you know.
And I want to add to that, going along the lines of, okay, I'm ready, I'm back to it. I was doing, I should be able to do these things I was doing a couple months ago. This is often when I hear the conversation around, well, why am I not getting my body back from the nutrition side of things, right? Why am I not dropping the weight? And I'm often having conversations around maintaining expectations around body composition change, what your body has been through, as Juliana is saying, from the physical side, and carrying that into kind of a mindset shift from I need to diet to get my body back to saying we're on a whole new journey, right? You are now training and rehabilitating your body differently. So you need to nourish that body and differently than you did before. So those are some of the conversations I'm usually having at this point, and helping people understand that, as we just mentioned, eating and then nutrient specificity, getting that variety in is key. Just like it's not safe to go out and get right back into that marathon training, it is not safe to start dropping your calories at this point either. So generally going below 1,200 calories, if people are tracking or have a general awareness, is not ideal. And if you're breastfeeding, the recommendation is not to go below 1,800. So many people need even more than that, but that, I see these magic numbers out there, like 1,200 calories or 1,400 calories is the key to weight loss. Generally not true, usually not true for most people, but then if you're breastfeeding, you have this extra demand, your body is still healing, 1,800 is like a bare minimum. So something to keep in mind.
Awesome. For those of you who are just joining us, my name is Jason Bahamundi. I am one of the owners of Run Try Bike, and we are talking today with Dr. Juliana Galante of Pacer Physical Therapy and Heather Zeman of Back Bay Health about women coming back from pregnancies. If you have a question, and trust me, I have a lot of them, so don't hesitate to ask yours. There's a little question mark on the bottom right-hand side. Just tap that and ask your question, and we'll get them answered for you. If we don't, we'll ask Heather or Juliana to answer it at some other point. We'll get it on there. If you missed the first part of this conversation, don't worry, it'll be on our IG feed as soon as this is over, as well as on our YouTube channel and our website. We've discussed, first 6 weeks and then 6 weeks to 12 weeks. So now the next phase, I guess, right, is 12 to 14 weeks. So Juliana, this is for you. Like, how would a woman know then, right, if she's taking it slow up until this point? I know there's not any sort of like magic moment, but what should they be looking for to get back into a regular running program? Is it at this phase or further on down the road? What are they looking for?
Yeah, so up to this point is when you're taking care of your body, you're working on your breathing, you're trying to introduce light core work, you're starting to do some strength training. I mean, this is a time a lot of runners, they don't really like strength training too much sometimes. And I'm like, this is the time to strength train. Like, your hormones are fluctuating. There is a lot more, just because of like your pelvis winding for the delivery, there's a lot more like laxity in your pelvis. So we really want to make sure, and that's just a fancy term for saying that it's just a little bit more loose because of hormones. But we just want to really try to get everything nice and stabilized by strengthening. So I can't emphasize enough getting in strengthening, any type of strength work with weights, any type of strength work that's single leg. So if I'm doing like lunges, or if I'm doing single leg squats, or if I'm doing step ups, things like that are going to be huge in getting back to running, because running really is a single leg activity. As you're going from right to left, you're never on really 2 feet when you're running. So you want to keep that in mind, unless you're doing a little like shuffle. But
I dare try that and run. Both feet touching the ground and close.
Yeah, so we want to definitely focus a lot on strengthening. And then also a big thing that a lot of things that I emphasize is introducing impact. Impact means jumping, it means box jumps, it means single leg hops, it means bounds, it means things like that, where you're really seeing how your body responds to that impact and that pressure. Because when you go back into running, you're going to be doing a lot of impacts to your body. So you want to just make sure, like, can I hop, what does that feel like? Does my body hurt when I do that? Do I leak when I do that? Does it not feel good on my left leg, but it feels good on my right leg? And then how can you kind of work with a therapist where, oh, okay, I tried some of these jumping exercises, maybe didn't feel good on my left side. What's going on my left side? Oh, maybe your core is a little weaker on that side. We'll just work on strengthening that. So if you ever feel unsure, a PT isn't a great place for you to really go and seek help, especially if you've tried some of these things. I've written a few blogs on this because I'm just trying to get the word out there on there is a progression and steps you want to take to get back to it that are going to be safer for your body. If you're like, okay, I did the breath work, I did the core work, I did the strengthening, I did the single leg strengthening, I did the impact, you're doing all the great stuff for your body, and now you're like, okay, I did all this stuff, can I just run already? Okay, you could run for 30 minutes, you could walk for 30 minutes without discomfort. Now you're ready for a walk run program, and this is the hardest part, because you're like, okay, I ran, I could do this. You go to walk and then you go to run again. You're like, do I have to walk again? Yes, go slowly. I can't emphasize that enough, that like giving yourself grace during this time is only going to make you come back stronger. I speak to a lot of women, and there are tons of professional runners out there too, that after their pregnancies, they've actually become faster. So things to keep in mind, marathoners, sprinters, and I really think it's those people who are giving themselves grace to give themselves time to heal. But I'm like, never in your life do you really have this special moment where maybe you have some time off from work, and maybe that's for extended period of times where you can actually be like, let me do some of the like little things like breathing and core work, where I just like have my 20 minutes after work, let me get out on a run, just to get out on a run. And then I have 20 minutes between meetings, let me get out on a run. And you don't have that extra time. So I think it's important to kind of fill that with some of these extra things instead of going back into running. So that was my long spiel on that, and we can touch more on it. But
I want to emphasize one thing that you said there, and it's not just for women coming back from pregnancies, is the rest and recovery. So for all you athletes that are watching this, keep in mind that you get stronger and you get faster during rest and recovery, not with more training. So I heard that, and it just reminded me like, hey, athletes, rest and recovery is training. Don't skip that part and keep overloading yourself with stuff. So excellent advice there also for, women coming back from having given birth. So Heather, for you, we see and hear, minerals and vitamins and for pregnancy, but then, we're talking about electrolytes and minerals and vitamins on that side for even those who aren't coming back from pregnancy. Are there specific vitamins that women should be looking for when they're in this phase of postpartum?
Absolutely. So in general, I recommend, and recommendations are to keep taking your prenatal vitamin throughout breastfeeding. So that is really going to help you fill in those gaps, especially as we just talked about getting our nutrients and our eating back to where it needs to be, or reestablishing new foundations for yourself. So continuing with the prenatal vitamin. And then, and this is true for athletes, whether recently pregnant or currently breastfeeding, but paying specific attention to iron and calcium are quite important. So, iron relates to your blood, your energy. So if you're feeling extreme fatigue, if you did have blood loss during delivery, this is one certainly that's going to be included in most labs, hopefully, depending how many checkups you have, right? Something I certainly check for people is iron levels, iron stores. So foods like, meat, even spinach, and pairing those, if they're from vegetable sources, pairing that with vitamin C can help with iron absorption. So, citrus, bell peppers, strawberries. So iron is super important. And calcium, if you're breastfeeding, you are at increased risk for bone loss. So hitting that recommended 1,000 milligrams a day, partially from your vitamin, most likely, and then dairy, fortified soy, and other fortified products is going to be really ideal. So those are a couple of nutrients I like to highlight, and that, women in general need to pay attention to.
One of the things you had talked about earlier was having more calories if you're breastfeeding. So are there risks to running while breastfeeding?
So short answer, no, but you need to realize that this is not the time to start peeling back calories. That's kind of the theme here, right? We're not doing drastic reductions. And Juliana was touching on something similar before that honestly has escaped my mind, but realizing that this is not the time to just start making these drastic changes, right? You need to now support your needs, your breastfeeding needs, and now these training needs on top of that. So interestingly, and this goes a little bit beyond nutrition into lifestyle, as it always does, but mastitis may be a concern for women who are running clogged, ducts. And so paying attention to what you're wearing before and after running, which is not my area of expertise. Juliana might be able to speak to that. Can you? Yeah, and the last thing I was gonna say was just lecithin may be helpful for just thinning out breast milk and preventing clogged ducts, interestingly.
Juliana, I'll let you take care of this then. Like us in the audience, you don't know what mastitis is. Like, just can you help understand what that is and then describe?
Well, yeah, it's a clogged duct that can happen like for multiple reasons. Like sometimes people overproduce, sometimes people are wearing really tight clothing and that can cause it. So there's multiple reasons for it, but I have a lot of clothing recommendations that I give to most of my postpartum moms, just because you really want to wear supportive clothing during this time. Like you don't want things to feel like they're just moving too much. Like that never feels good. It almost like deters you from wanting to go back into things. So I really encourage people, and I can give you like my list of stuff if that's super helpful, because me shouting out Under Armour and Nike right now is excessive, but I give you my list of like bras that I recommend. I have some like high-waisted pants that I love from different companies that because your clothing, wearing specific clothing, especially during these first few months, is going to just help to promote feeling like good about yourself again, and feeling like you can like get back into these things without feeling like everything's moving too much and you feel self-conscious, because that's the last thing we want for you. We want you to feel like empowered to get back to doing some of these things, knowing your body might not feel the same for a little bit, and that's okay. But clothing definitely is a big thing, and shoe wear is also really important. A lot of women will go up a half a shoe size, hard word to say. And it is important to get new shoes. Like get a pair of shoes that are going to fit your new feet. This might be your feet permanently, they might not. The only thing really that's happened is like more pressure can happen, as you're pregnant, and that's kind of the theory of like the foot kind of expanding. Some people actually can develop a little bit of inflammation in their limbs, so that's another theory for why it expands. But complement how your body is responding in your postpartum period with proper shoe wear and then proper clothing. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them for you.
We talk about proper shoe wear. We touch on visiting run specialty stores all the time on our platform. And so would you recommend that people, coming back from pregnancy, go to run specialty stores and ask those questions to make sure they're getting the right footwear for themselves?
Yeah. And again, like you might just be wearing a bigger shoe for a short period of time. Especially if you're really trying to start training right away and you're in your first year postpartum, you might fit into a bigger shoe and then actually go back to a smaller shoe. So just know that that's not uncommon. You might feel like you need more supportive shoes. And I think the biggest recommendation I have with that is train barefoot, like not running, but like strength train barefoot. Because that's going to help to naturally strengthen the arches of your feet. I always recommend a lot of like foot and ankle strengthening. So like whether you're doing like balance type exercises, calf raises, things like that are going to be more important in your postpartum period, just to maintain good foot and ankle strength and health. I do see a lot of women who get an ankle sprain because they just don't think about those things. So just something like for prevention that's really important to do. And then I just wanted to go back to like Heather was talking about breastfeeding, and I just wanted to talk about, there are a few factors. There was newer research that came out in the last 2 years about just risk factors for women who want to get back into running, and I think it's important to know these. You do increase your risk of injury if you are breastfeeding, and that's only because I think the research didn't really say specifically why, but in my expertise, I think it does have a lot to do with nutrition. And I think it does have a lot to do with kind of rushing, like, okay, I just breastfed, let me go out and run, and not really doing the correct steps to warm up. Stress can play a huge factor. I'll let you touch more on that, Heather, but stress can play a huge factor. And then also lack of sleep. Again, we spoke about recovery. During your first year postpartum, you're going to have these times where baby might not be sleeping well, baby's sleeping well, baby went through a regression. So I know it's hard to control that, but your lack of sleep is aiding in your amount of recovery you're going to get. So it's really important to be mindful of, this is a day I did not sleep well. Maybe it's not a day I'm going to do a harder run, or I'm going to try to go on my first postpartum run, because I really want you to set yourself up for success. So just keep that in mind, that those factors can play a role. A prior injury can sometimes come back in your postpartum period to plague you if you don't take the necessary steps like strength training and core strengthening. So just keep that in mind. Nutrition, which is very vague on there. My girl can help you out there. Your mode of nutrition, your mode of delivery will change your factors of getting back into running. If you've had a C-section, again, you're recovering from a surgery as well as a pregnancy. So it's really important to keep that in mind. And then if you've ever had any symptoms of incontinence, which is leakage, people sometimes joke around, oh, I'm pregnant, obviously I'm going to leak, but that's not necessarily normal. And there is people out there that can help you, and that's physical therapists. So feel free, if you ever have any of those issues, know that you can go to a local PT and they will be able to help you during your pregnancy or postpartum.
Awesome. For those of you who just joined us, my name is Jason Bahamudi. I'm one of the owners of Run Try Bike. Thank you for joining us on our Tuesday Fireside Chats that we've been hosting. Sign up for our newsletter. We send out the month prior who all of our guests are going to be for the upcoming month. And so we've got July, which will come out in the newsletter probably in the next week or so. So make sure you sign up for our newsletter. You can go to our website and get that, and you can see who's going to be joining us. Today, we're joined by Dr. Juliana Galante of Pacer Physical Therapy and Heather Zeman of Back Bay Health. And we've been discussing getting back to exercise with questions about nutrition and physical therapy for postpartum. And so, Heather, I will pose this to you. We've discussed 3 different phases so far: 0 to 6, 6 to 12, 12 to 14. So now 14 plus weeks in my mind, right? We're at 3.5, 4 months, which to me seems like a lot of time, but clearly I don't know what I'm talking about since I'm a male and I'm not giving birth. And you can laugh at that. And for those of you who are laughing with me, put the little question mark, tap that, ask the question, because I clearly am not an expert in this, which is why we have 2 experts here. Now that we're getting into this area of 3.5, 4 months, what changes now? Or what are we looking at now? Are we still hyper-focused on all of the little things that we were doing back on 0 to 6 weeks? Or are we back to where we were when we were prior to pregnancy even? Because I'm sure during pregnancy it changes too.
For sure. And the answer, of course, as usual, is it depends a bit, right? And so I'm going to answer this as if you are breastfeeding. So those nutrient and calorie needs are there. And to segue back for a minute to what Juliana was saying about increased risk for injury is when you're breastfeeding, you are pulling nutrients from your body. So that's why you need to put them in, so you're not risking your own nutrient stores and nutrient abilities, especially if you are exercising and performing to the level that we're talking about, right? So you need to meet all of those demands for your performance, feeding your baby, and then recovery and reducing risk of injury. So then if you're breastfeeding, that is still important. And now you may be moving into building mileage. You may be moving into training for something. So the demands are that much greater. And this is where those principles that we've discussed are still true, but we're now moving into strategies around endurance training. We're talking about, how many servings of carbohydrates you're having, a bit more specifically based on the length of training you're doing. Are you hydrating during that run that's going longer than 45 minutes or maybe even shorter because you are breastfeeding? So that's when these individual strategies come into play. And I could go through all of them, but all to say it is so nuanced, as you know, being in this world. And so this is where I'm helping people bring those training strategies together with what they need to meet their needs, their body's needs, and their baby's needs, kind of making it make sense for them.
Awesome. So Juliana, we're at 3.5, 4 months. We're itching to go. What's the advice you're going to give to your patients and who are just like, okay, it's been 3.5, 4 months? Because again, there's probably type A athletes who've been training leading up to this and they're like, let's go. Like, I want to go. What's the advice now at this point?
Yeah, so I'm always for building mileage. Again, walk, run programs are like my go-to, but I also really focus a lot here on time on your feet. You know, before your pregnancy, you were maybe doing 8-minute miles, and now you're like, oh, I got to run my 2 miles and I have to do it in this time. I just want you to be able to run for 20 minutes. And what does that feel like for you? And then in your subsequent weeks, we just want to build yours up slowly, 30 minutes. What does 30 minutes feel like? And just kind of slowly build based on time. And I really focus on distance first and then intensity, just as your body gets used to impact again in your postpartum body, and then also to complement that with continuous strength training. And that's really important in your first year postpartum, whether you are breastfeeding, which is even more necessary, or you're bottle feeding, doesn't matter. You still want to make sure that your hormones are regulating, your body's coming back to, and you want to make sure that you're really giving yourself some stability and some strength and complementing your runs and your cardio with strength training. Strength training is super important for anyone, whether you're postpartum or you're not. If you're a triathlete, you should be doing some form of strength training. And at this point, I want to really emphasize increasing the weight too, because your child is now growing. So now your child's going to be 20, 30, and 40 pounds. And if you're only doing 10-pound kettlebell swings or, lifting 10-pound weights, it's not really translating over to now your new life. So I do encourage you to, really try to increase your weights so that you're able to really take care of your growing child, and being really mindful of, how you're carrying and lifting your child as they grow, because a lot of people now are lowering the cribs. People want to be able to really pull and get their child in and out of their crib. So I do a lot of education on like ergonomics as your child grows and how to like get strong through those patterns as well. And that translates super well into like deadlifts and squats and things like that too. So with your return to running, you also want to think about increasing your weight with strength training. That's really
Awesome. That's obviously something that everybody can take advice from. So we're about 41 minutes into this, so we're getting up on the end, and my favorite part, but I just want to say thank you to both of you for helping me not sound dumb as we went through this conversation, because just reading the information that you guys supplied me beforehand was super educational, and I hope everybody who joined us and watches this also is able to have gotten something out of it, especially for male partners, right? This is not something that we're ever have to go through physically, but from a supportive side of it all, it's good to understand what's happening and be able to process this information and help out. Dr. Galante, tell us anything that you've got to tell us about. We talked about your 12-week program. Give us more information about that and where the people in the audience can find you.
Sure. Yeah. So I have created this online program. It's 12 weeks and it's a step-by-step kind of process of getting back to running and exercise postpartum. So instead of kind of guessing through some of the things we spoke about today, you literally can follow videos and go through the whole 12-week and get back to running on your own with just a series of like, how do I engage my core again? How do I understand what muscles I'm working when I'm doing these movements? I also complement that a lot with education as well. So, again, how do I carry and lift my baby as they're growing? And then also, how do I take care of myself if I've had a C-section versus a vaginal delivery? What does that look like? I also interview a lot of experts on there in different realms of postpartum. So that includes sleep consultants, that includes great nutritionists like Heather, that includes if your child is having a speech and language need. I have experts on there where you'll be able to get videos and content and to kind of decide like, maybe there is something I need support on, like even lactation help, and I have some consultants on there as well. So it goes through the exercise stages, but you'll also get resources from other providers that can really help you and your growing family. And then I just wanted to touch on one more thing, and that's when you're returning to exercise, it's really important to have these open conversations with your support team, because now you have a little one and it's not as easy to just go out for a run. So having these conversations with your partner or your family that, hey, this is really important to me. This is my identity. I am an athlete, but I know I need to take care of this little one and I can't leave them by themselves. How can you help support me in getting my time? And I think the biggest thing is we feel guilty, like I just need my 30 minutes, please. But, you know, just having those conversations with your partner so they can really support you is really important. So I highly encourage you to have those even during your pregnancy. Like, how are we going to navigate working out? Because one of us has to wake up and feed the baby. And is it just going to be my partner, or is it going to, can I have that time too? So
where can folks get the information for the 12-week program and all the great advice you give?
Sure. So you can go to pacerphysicaltherapy.com, and you can always email me or DM me as well, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
And I'll tell the audience, you can also find her work on our website on runtrimag.com. Go to articles, run, pregnancy and postpartum, click on there. Her bio is on there with links to everything as well. Where can people find you? What are you doing? Where else can they get help from you?
Awesome. You can find me at Back Bay Health, which is a practice here in Boston. I do virtual and in-person sessions, so those are both options. And I will say this can start during pregnancy, this can start postpartum, and it can be as nuanced as you want it to be. As I mentioned when we start, I'm often helping people kind of reorient themselves around past dieting behaviors and beliefs, and that really comes through kind of at all stages of life, but especially postpartum. So sometimes we're talking about specific nutrients and meeting needs. Sometimes we're just talking about like what kind of oat bars you're going to make to keep next to your bed while you're breastfeeding. So it really spans a broad spectrum, which is what makes my job fun. There's the science, there's the data, and there's the real life application of it, as there is in our world. So backbayhealth.com is where you can find me. So in addition to nutrition counseling, I also offer meal planning. So I do have a meal planning platform that can, you know, if you don't feel like you necessarily need counseling, or if we use it in conjunction, can help you actually lay out your breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks to meet those needs right now and as you go through training. So there's a lot of dynamic flexibility there. And I think the last note I want to end on is just to say, be kind to yourself, be compassionate with yourself. And as I started with, small changes really add up. So hopefully working with a dietitian like myself, a physical therapist like Juliana, can really bring it all together and help you realize that it does take a team, but little things can really make you feel better over time.
Here's my advice to those partners. If you're taking your partner's oat bar from the nightstand, replace it. Just eat it on your
I have to say my role in life is often, especially as a lot of family and friends are having babies, I come with nutrition advice and I come with cookies. So those are my two roles in life.
I'm going to have to head to Boston then. I need some cookies. So here's the rapid fire portion, which is our favorite. And if you've seen our reels, you know there's one question that you have to get right in my mind, but we'll get to that in a second. So Juliana, we'll start with you. When you're working out, are you listening to music, podcast, or nothing?
Ooh. See, in my prior life, I was music always, but now I could do music or just nothing, actually.
What kind of music?
Oh, it has to be like that hype music, you know, old school 90s, sometimes 80s. You know, I kind of go around. It depends.
Favorite artist then?
What was that?
And then the favorite artist in that music genre from the 90s?
Oh, from the 90s? I'm really bad. I don't have favorites. I don't have favorites. I like them all.
That's a good political answer.
Old school, I like them.
Heather, for you?
Music all the time, and I kind of same era, like late 90s into 2000s pop, R&B, just put the Spotify station on and let it go.
Yeah. And the artist, when it comes on, you're like, oh, hell yeah.
Justin Timberlake is my one and only.
Ooh, that's a good one.
He's my favorite too. One of my favorites anyway. Bucket list event. Heather, what's one event that you have to do?
I have to say, so I ran my first and only half marathon in 2020. I was supposed to run it in Newport, Rhode Island, and I ran it with one of my girlfriends. I don't know if she's on here, but my beloved friend Erica, who is kind of a marathon champion, ran it with me during COVID in April 2020 around the Charles River. So she outlined a course, paced me, and was my running buddy with our, bandanas around our face at that time. So I've done a half marathon, but my bucket list right now is to actually do a half marathon.
Good for you. Juliana?
I live in Boston now, so I have to do the Boston Marathon at some point. I did New York, so the goal is to try to qualify for Boston. It's going to be
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited.
That's exciting.
Hopefully soon.
Okay, so here's the question. Pineapple on pizza, yay or nay? Juliana?
I'm from New York. No.
Thank you. Heather? Don't get this wrong, Heather.
Then no. I'll eat it, but I'm not going to order it, but I would eat that. I will eat almost anything, to be honest with you.
We'll have to figure out how we make that work.
You guys can kick me out later, yeah.
Yeah, you're
Exactly.
from the group message, from the group text. All right, Heather, is candy corn a real candy?
I hate it. No.
Juliana?
Well, I can't say yes after she just said
I'll berate you for that. You get me for the pineapple.
It's not a real candy. It's candle wax. Come on.
I'll eat it. I'm sorry.
We'll have our next episode on gut health and what that's not
There you
doing.
go. All right, then Juliana, are peeps a real candy?
No.
No. And Heather, all right. We finally are all in agreement on this. Everybody's back in the group chat. You guys have been awesome. Thank you so much. We'll try to get you guys back on here again. I'm sure the topic of conversation isn't going to go away, obviously, anytime soon. And I'm sure there'll be new research that comes out, and would love to get you guys back on here to discuss as things progress. Thank you so much. Next week, for those of you that are in the audience watching us, we'll be talking to Maria, the toeless runner. It'll be a fascinating conversation about physical challenges and how to overcome them. And obviously by the name, the toeless runner, you know what her physical challenge is that she's overcoming. Go to runtrimag.com. You will find the other Fireside Chats. You can go to YouTube and find them there as well. This one will be live on the feed here within a few minutes after we sign off. What else can I tell you guys? Sign up for our newsletter so you get notified about it. We're trying to bring as much content as possible. Go to info@runtrimag.com and tell us what is it you want to hear from experts like Heather and Juliana, and we'll be doing our best to get them on here. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We'll talk to you soon. Have a great night.
Thank you, Jason.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.